Anyone who disagrees with me is a leftist. This is the 5-year-old's guide to arguing politics. Now, actually, this isn't new. This used to be what the left would do. That anyone that disagreed with me was a Nazi. But the right has decided to adopt it too. And I hate to say it, but the right, at the rate they're going, is going to make me have to admit, very reluctantly, not that he's right about everything, but that James Lindsay is indeed right about the woke right. That's what we're going to be talking about tonight, live here in a special edition of the LCI Green Room. Good evening, everybody. My name is Jacob Winograd. I'm apparently a raging leftist libertarian who wants pure, unadulterated open borders. That is my calling card, which anyone who knows me will know that is quite quite an apt description for my political views. But I am the host of the Biblical Anarchy podcast here at the Libertarian Christian Institute. And I want to clear up something too. This will all make sense a little bit later in the stream, but I am not, and I never have been, the head of, the founder of, or the runner of the Libertarian Christian Institute. I am merely a contributor of the podcast network, to the Christian for Liberty network, and I also write for LCI, and I host this show, The Green Room, a lot as well, although I'm not the primary host. I'm just the one who has the most time on his hands to do live streams. That's not even true. I have 5 kids. I don't have that much time on my hands. I just love talking with you guys. But yeah, it's been an interesting couple days. There's just been a little bit of drama and shots fired, and I thought that I would do a live stream tonight and just that sometimes you want to do a live stream where you just respond to drama and things on social media. You don't necessarily have to have a super specific thing that you want to talk about, or you have a bunch of little things you want to talk about that you don't necessarily feel like deserve their own episodes to themselves. So I'm here with you all on a Friday night, and wherever you're watching, if you could make sure to like this stream, wherever you're watching, subscribe if you haven't already. If you're watching this on X, you can go to my profile and follow me if you haven't already. And if you're listening to the audio later, 5-star reviews, of course, always help us out in those podcast algos, wherever you listen, whether it's Spotify or Apple or whatever podcast apps you are using these days. But I was going to be joined by a friend of mine tonight, Jeremiah, but I don't know if he'll make it or not. We'll see. He might be able to join late, and we'll talk a little bit about some of this. He's messaging me right now. I'm going to just tell him to hop on late if he can. So hop on late if you can. Jeremiah, it's actually funny. This gets into this whole left-right thing, right? And I remember it was like a year and a half ago when I think I've known about Jeremiah for a long time, but him and I had our first podcast conversation like a year and a half ago. And, he's portrayed as this unreasonable, argumentative, more lefty leaning anarchist. And there's, to at least some parts of the liberty movement, I'm considered more right wing than Hoppe or something. I don't know. There are some people that have very weird views of me, which is kind of bewildering to me, because I kind of feel like when I'm hearing myself talk, I still feel like the nerdy, mild-mannered kid I was in high school. So when you're reading, it's funny. I was the other day, Facebook does that Facebook memories thing, and I was remembering when I haven't talked to him in a while, but a friend of mine, Thomas Quitter, or Quieter, I forget his last name, but he's he's handicapped. He does a lot of stuff in the liberty movement to kind of showcase how free markets and liberty and sort of like, community can provide for people better than the state does. And he has this like running gag because he's handicapped that like I run better than the government. But I invited him on for a conversation back on my old podcast, the Daniel 3 podcast. And when he announced it on his Facebook page, there was just droves of people who went on there and were just like, if you would have read, Hody, you're watching, you probably remember this. I mean, if you would have read the descriptions that people were giving me, literally like, you shouldn't talk to Nazis was like the most common response I think that happened in that post. I was just like, uh, and now you fast forward, and now there's people on the right that because, well, in their mind, as I said in the opening, I'm for open borders or something, but I'm not. I'm just not maybe as for closed borders as some on the right are. But that's enough to have me labeled as a lefty now, and basically, just this egalitarian socialist. I don't know. I definitely have my, for being honest, I lean right on a lot of issues, but is that like the right way? Like, I did a live stream actually Monday night of this week. I have no concept of time, people, but it was with Alex, Bernardo, and Cody Cook, and we did a live stream discussion. Yeah, it was just on Monday about is libertarianism left or right? And even though I was arguing a lot of the time for it being more right wing than left wing, it's not a neat, like one-to-one thing. Uh, and not just with libertarianism, but also like because like ultimately at the end of the day, my loyalty is not to these isms, right? Like I'm not a libertarian first, I'm not a right winger first or a conservative first. I'm a Christian first. And I try to be a Christian first to the extent that like I mean I think of there are some hard passages in the Bible. The one that sticks out to me the most is when Jesus has says like if you don't hate your father and your mother and your brother, um, or love them less than me, then uh, then you can't follow after me, right? You can't serve me, and that's the kind of faith and loyalty to Christ that I try to aspire for. And I'm at the end of the day, I at least I strive. I guess everyone to some extent we want to please certain people or have the approval of certain people, but ultimately, like in terms of just the things I believe and the things I advocate for, I'm ultimately just trying to honor Christ. I'm honestly just trying to honor the biblical worldview to which I have kind of uh, built my life upon, right? The firm foundation, and so it that I think that is kind of the source of a lot of this. I think that when we as Christians are radically committed to living lives transformed by Christ, then those who are operating solely in the systems and machinations of the world are going to be sometimes triggered by that because, well, for two reasons. One, because if you don't fit neatly on their side, you must be the other side, right? And it's a binary. And they can't even conceptualize nuance to the degree where you could, like be someone who's mostly conservative, but maybe have a few positions or beliefs that just don't quite fit into that conservative worldview. So, but I kind of went on a tangent there. Let's talk about Jeremiah. Jeremiah is this guy who gets a lot of, he and I are like kindred spirits because we sort of get this weird thing where we have very weird obsessive haters and people who depict us to be these like the characters of us that like we're hard to get along with. And maybe it's true, maybe we are hard to get along with and we just that's why we get along so well. I don't know, but him and I have always gotten on uh very well, even in disagreement. He's kind of intense in the way he talks. I don't know. I, I also know that some of my audience have at sometimes been like a little bit uh like when I have someone like Jeremiah on or I have uh, like my friend Hody on, or I have other people who are from my audience leans mostly right. When I talk to left wingers, like listen, I'm a podcaster, right? And I track my views and my likes and my comments. It's not like when I have my left leaning or more socially liberal leaning friends on that those episodes do better, right? So I'm not, it's like I love you, the people watching this. I love my audience, but I do this podcast ultimately to try to honor Christ and to try to have conversations with people, even people I disagree with, because I I think that's valuable. I think that's it's valuable to just to not have an echo chamber and to be able to hear from people you disagree with because they're going to think differently than you, right? They're going to think differently than you. They're going to see different things than you, and they're going to give you I think of Jordan Peterson in his heyday, right? And his 12 rules and all that. One of his rules was that when you're talking to someone, to always assume they know something vitally important that you don't know. And that has been the experience of my life, that I can sit down with someone who I have a lot of disagreements with, who is perhaps maybe temperamentally someone I don't like even, but they're going to know things that I don't. They have a perspective that I don't, and that is going to help us to be just more well-rounded people. I also just think like it's funny. Someone literally uh, commented something to this effect. Like I kind of find it boring to just talk to people I agree with. Not that I do that too, but usually that's kind of more like so there are some podcast episodes you do where you're trying to dive deep into a subject and really unpack it, right? And I tend to do that with people who are like promoting the same vision or version of Christianity and libertarianism and the connection between the two that I am. So that's why I'll talk to Bob Murphy or Gregory Baus or Kerry Baldwin, other LCI co-associates of mine, and those are fun too, don't get me wrong. But there's something like if this podcast and the live streams I do were just nothing but like, how many ways can I just repackage my beliefs and my brand and just the way I view the world? Like, no, I like the contrast. I like the I guess maybe because I have a background in speech and debate, but more than that, just temperamentally, I just like I enjoy the back and forth of like when you're in that zone with someone where you have enough in common to kind of establish a little bit of common ground, and then you kind of like just keep on uh adding new things to the table to see like where you agree and disagree, and you see where that stacks up and that compare and contrast. And I just yeah, I just think that's better. We're gonna be better individuals. We're going to, I mean, this is part of what sharpening iron is in the Bible. This is why Jesus had 12 disciples that were all very different from each other. This is, the metaphors about like the body of Christ and all that. And it's a free market principle too, right? It's just free speech and competition and like decentralized knowledge. Like I yeah, I just anyway, so Jeremiah might join late, and if he does, he's certainly like I'm not going to sit here and say Jeremiah is not a character, but you know to me he's an entertaining character, and even when we disagree, I like hearing him rant. He does listen. He also like he has the kind of him and I have one thing very different, which is that I'm more interested in ideas, and I don't necessarily go down and do a lot of like investigating into particular people or movements or things like that. And Jeremiah is very good at that. Um, Sometimes he's not good at presenting that information. Like he'll do so much research into people or things, and then the transfer of that information can be a problem. But he's got the kind of temperament to look into things very intensively that I don't. Um, which I appreciate. But he turned me on to what we're going to be talking about tonight, which was there's this guy who he's been kind of like on my radar, but not in a big way. But like I've heard of him, I've seen people say certain things about him. I don't even know his real name. On social media, on Twitter, he goes by N of One. And well, let's go ahead and I'm going to share my screen and we'll play the clip of, and you will understand what I've been referencing this entire time. So hold on, let me pull this up. All right, I'm just trying to pull this up so that it's ready to. All right, we're going to share screen. By the way, go to libertarianchristians.com/donate so I can afford a producer so that these things run smoother. All right. And share. And you guys let me know that you can hear that. Also, let me just change that background quick. All right.
Like Elizabeth Warren, who would completely throw the borders open. Like it's a no-brainer, obviously. But according to them, it's essentialism. It's like because of his birth in that group, he cannot do anything right.
Yeah, not even necessarily an open borders leftist or Democrat, but
by the way, just to be clear, this guy here is not N of One. This guy is like called Martinez or something. I don't know his full name, but he has this show, Martinez Politics, and you don't see N of One, but he's the one who Martinez is talking to on the other line of his, I don't know, Skype or Zoom call or whatever. So he's the one talking right now.
There are still plenty of open borders evangelical conservatives like David Petrolico on Twitter and a number of others who follow the likes of James Lindsay, Konstantin Kitson, and Colin Wright. There's that whole crowd of what you could call anti-woke globalists. There's a libertarian counterpart of them as well in a figure called Jacob Winograd, who runs the Libertarian Christian Institute. He's a total open borders race denier. There are plenty of those types out there.
Yeah, maybe we can get into that a little bit. So what is with these freak show libertarians that?
Yeah, so there you have it, folks. I am a open borders left libertarian race denier, which I don't even like. I don't like throwing the term dog whistle around, but that is just such a loaded term. Like what like, I mean, way to just sort of put all your cards on the table and let people know what you're what you're peddling in, right? So I don't know. So I don't know if you've noticed people. I don't know if you've noticed N of One, but yeah, there are people out there who have a different lineage from different parts of the world, and they tend to have different physical characteristics, like skin color, and sometimes certain illnesses and genetic predispositions to certain conditions. That vary. Like, I don't deny race. I don't know anyone who, like, what is race? Like, it's such a dumb term. This is why I'm saying it's such a dumb term, because when someone uses the word race denier, they don't mean what that actually seems to imply, right? Like someone that's like, I mean, I know there's like the expression, which I think has value to it. Like, I don't see color, but like that's kind of an expression, right? It doesn't mean I literally see a white person and a black person standing next to each other, and I'm just like, I deny race. Race is a social construct, right? Like, I don't know anyone who, now people might have discussions about like what is race and how do we define it, and like there are parts about race and ethnicity which are fluid and not like 100% without some kind of wiggle room to it, right? Especially as people have mixed lineages and things like that. But that doesn't mean that things like differences between ethnicities and race don't exist, and that like there's not people out there who are deniers of race. What that term means is essentially like anyone who doesn't buy into some kind of like racial determinism that like white people are white people and they're different than black people and just fundamentally, just such distinct ways that like they're almost different subspecies that can't coexist and live together, or they're too different, right? Like it's there's a spectrum there, and I always like to be careful to not throw the word Nazi around too casually, and it's kind of like to a fault. Like I am kind of like the caricature of a person that like I need to almost see someone putting on the Nazi uniform and saying Hail Hitler before I actually go like, yeah, okay, he's probably a Nazi, because I just hate how much that word's been overused, and I try to just be very careful to not throw it out. But this is absolutely the term of someone who is at least duped by, if not willfully diving into the deep waters of racial determinism and bigotry. And I don't think that there's almost a false binary from these sorts of people that I've encountered a lot of them, and not of some of them who even claim to be libertarians and Christians. You see this a lot in like the Christian nationalist camps, and I have some people in my audience who are like, kind of caught in the null space between kind of being libertarian-ish but sympathizing with Christian nationalism, and it's often because of concerns about culture and borders and the extent to which do we cede the public square to the left, or do we as Christians on the right have to claim that public square and just impose our culture because it's it's kill or be killed, right? We can't throw the ring into the fire, right? We can't take the ring to Mount Doom, so it's either us or them. Like this is kind of the Christian nationalist argument, although it's really not even their argument. It's just kind of a repackaged general, fight over power dilemma that's not unique to the nature of the state. It's just its current iteration of it. But yeah, I mean, we put it this way: someone who's using the term unironically race denier to describe someone who is just not like, like this guy's also, I've looked into his feed and whatnot, and like he calls people race traitors. He's been like, how can you criticize people? I'm just like, I'm sorry, like I don't deny race. I'm just, as I said at the beginning, I'm not loyal to white people. My loyalty is to Christ. My loyalty is to morality, is to ethics, is to right and wrong. And these things don't they have nothing to do with someone's skin color or someone's genetics. Someone, like, even to the extent that there are some things that differ between different ethnicities and races, just like some things differ between men and women. But like, we're not talking about so put it this way: men and women are different, but men and women at the same time are more similar than they are different, right? And that's the same thing with race. Like, I think there are differences we can notice and observe in the world between different ethnicities and races, but they're not. First of all, they're differences that we see in, like, there's a spectrum of differences. Some of them which are pretty much like kind of fixed, maybe like skin color, and other ones that are not so fixed, and they're on a spectrum, and there's averages, right? And I don't think we have to shy away from those conversations. Like, there's people who say that, that's the other thing, that like, oh, if you're not playing their game, that means you don't want to have the conversation. It's like, no, I've been having these conversations for years. I'm not an egalitarian, but it turns out there's actually like a whole universe of options between egalitarian and Nazi. Turns out that there's more than two choices here, folks. And yeah, I don't like, so yeah, throwing out terms like race traitor and race denier shows, especially if this person claims to be a Christian, which I think he at least does in some nominal sense, but I haven't dug that deep into him, but he has that that tree emoji in his bio, which is usually like it's a reference to the appeal to heaven flag. which I actually like that symbol, and I'm very aggravated when right-wing fascist adjacents are trying to co-op it. But yeah, no, I'm sorry. I couldn't care less about race and skin color. That is not a game that any Christian should be playing. The scripture is replete in New Testament and even in Old Testament. The Old Testament, it's maybe a bit more softer spoken, but the entire narrative of scripture culminates in the complete rejection of viewing people based on these secondary categories of, male, female, Jew, Greek, free, slave. Like, if we as Christians are supposed to be imitators of Christ, if we're supposed to pray to have the heart of the Father, to look at people through the eyes that God sees them, like, God, what we care about are people's actions, their integrity, their ethics, their virtues. We can even care about their culture, right? We care about the things they believe and the things they do. So, yeah. Anyway, a bit of a rant there. Well, I'll finish this clip out because I can't quite remember everything he said, but let's go back to it.
One open borders. You got a guy named Kaplan who's like made it his mission to run around the world advocating for open borders. You got the head of the Libertarian Party. I think he went to the border, made a video. He's like, we need more immigrants. What the fuck is wrong with these people, man? Like, are they so attached to their ideology of pure unadulterated freedom that they can't see the threats that come along with mass immigration?
I've noticed a huge amount of horseshoe between the authoritarian right and the third positionists and the libertarian left, in that they both deify the state, whereas the third positionists deify it positively as something that can now commune with this national will that through aggressive, violent social engineering can right all the nation's wrongs. Whereas the libertarian left, or basically just anarchists, really, and they identify as such, view the state as this like demonic kind of entity. So whenever the state does anything that restricts some sort of freedom, even if it's freedom for obvious criminals like trespassers and.
All right. Wow. I'm just remembering how bad it is. I'm remembering how awful this spiel is. Okay, so anyone who is an anarchist is a leftist now, I guess, which is stupid. I'm sorry, but like if being right wing means anything, it means being for order, right? It means being for hierarchy. The state is the opposite of, like to me, hierarchy means the opposite of force. Hierarchy is what happens in the market, right? It's when people, through their free interactions in different spheres and slices of society, organize themselves based upon competence and like natural authority to do certain jobs. And you get people who serve different functions, and some of them will be in positions above others. You get hierarchies of competence, hierarchies of authority, and society is complex. There is just, unfortunately, this sort of like conflation in language and in history, and this is for many reasons. There's like normalcy bias, there's propaganda, but order is not synonymous with central planning. I'm sorry. And it's actually quite unbiblical and unchristian to presume that you can centrally plan any society of any size. I mean, I'd be curious to know if this person was a father, because just try to centrally plan your family. Most people can't even do that, right? We try. It's hard enough to make plans for like today and tomorrow, right? And like a week from now, and a year from now. You can barely manage to, take care of your own house, and you think you can, put people in charge of an entire state or entire nation. Like, this isn't hierarchy, that's just fiat, right? It's the opposite of hierarchy. At least, like an actual competent hierarchy. Like, I don't think, I guess this is my own way of looking at it, but to me, when you take the natural and voluntary part out of a relationship, like, I don't think hierarchy is synonymous with domination, right? Like, there's not a hierarchy between free people and the people that like enslaved people, right? Like in 1800s America, you wouldn't say that, like, well, the hierarchy is the white plantation owner and the black slave. It's like, no, that's not. You don't describe that as a hierarchy. You describe that as, like, there are these people who are owning and enslaving with violence other people. Yeah, so it's not synonymous at all. And then anyway, Jeremiah is here now, so I'm going to bring him up on the stage. Hey,
hello. Apologies for the lateness. I was finishing a hole.
Not a problem. You every time you talk about digging a hole, complete tangent, but I think about the Friends episode where Joey digs a hole on the beach. That's what comes to my head.
I did not watch any of Friends. It always struck me as, and this is going to catch me a lot of, maybe more flack than anything else I say this evening, it always struck me as boring. But maybe I'm not, informed enough.
It just depends on the episode and the season. Friends is one of those shows that got worse as time went on. But no, so yeah, thanks for making it, man. So I started playing the clip already.
All right.
We've established that anyone who is for, you got a little bit of background noise there. I'm going to mute you for a second. We've established that anyone who is for complete, he's taking his mic off, so you won't be able to hear me. Yeah, he had a fan on. All right, we'll let him get his mic back on.
Apologies.
Right.
I had a fan on because I was clearing off the sweat, doing the work and then coming back and then going for getting the run done to get back in time. Yeah,
not a problem. So yeah, we've established so far that anyone who is an anarchist is a leftist.
Yeah,
there was that bit, and that I'm for I'm a left libertarian who runs the Libertarian Christian Institute and is for total open borders, and I'm a race denier. Which is just,
none of that is true, and
it is actually quite impressive to get every single fact in a sentence wrong.
Yeah. And the thing is, the race denier bit is one of those emotionally loaded things. It's like if you use the term sex denial, it's because you're a transphobe. You have this term that is loaded against trans people that you're using, and you're using it to basically imply that if you disagree with me about trans people, you're denying sex entirely as a concept. And race denial is very similar, and from very similar people, in that if you say you're a race denier, you're saying basically not having my conceptualization of race and not having my particular prescription for how to handle race conflicts and the like. You're a race denier. You're denying the conflict as I see it, and therefore you're denying race itself, because race and the conflict is inherent in my mind.
Well, it's such a stupid, I was saying before, which I don't know if you caught any of it, but it's such a stupid term, because who's going through life seeing a black person, white person next to each other, and not I know there's the phrase, I don't see color, which is more of an expression to be I don't go through life primarily labeling people black, white, Asian, whatever, which I think is something kind of noble to kind of strive for, as long as you're not trying to necessarily do it to the,
you don't want to be one of those, you don't want to be one of those people who's oh yeah, you're just like anybody else, and you deny their struggles, you deny what it means to them, you're basically a moral busybody to the extent where you're even denying them their life.
Right, exactly. Just to be because there are differences in like just histories and cultures and things like that that often align along with those racial distinctions. But like no one's actually going around and saying like, I don't believe that human beings have any like clustering of like people who came from different regions and thus have slightly different now because like the nuance here, the way I put it, is that like just like men and women are different, but also men and women are more similar than they are different, is kind of how I view race. Where like, yeah, there are differences between ethnicities and races, but also like in the grand scheme of things, they have more in common than they have in different. So, so it's not denying race or sex to say either of those statements.
Well, and like the thing is, like, I get I get called a sex denier, for instance, because I support trans people, and I have an understanding of like chromosomal variations and a bunch of other scientific things that mean that maybe it's more of a bimodal distribution and less of a strict binary. So that gets me called a sex denier. And similarly, because for your audience, like I'm the the woke pseudo lefty that like the Nazis think Jacob is. So like similarly, because I know where the actual terms started, white and black, like those terms started in very racist roots. And the origins of those terms were basically to say this group of people is okay to oppress. This group of people is okay to subjugate. This group of people is less than you, 3/5 of you, one could say. And so, like, basically, if you say black and white in anything other than, they want to be described that way because that's their identity way, which I'm not going to take from them. Like, oh, yeah, I'm a black man. No, you're not. I know better than you what you are. I'm not going to do that shit. But like, if they want to have a conversation about like the history and the racist roots of the actual definitions, then I can do that. And it's that sort of similarity. Like, nobody is purely black or white. In fact, I'm a little bit redder than I was earlier today because I did work for a living. And
right, exactly. Like race is one of those things. I think the way I said it was that like there are differences in terms of like different genealogies, but as people mix and commingle, and even
which
within,
they should. Miscegenation is objectively good for genetics.
Well, and the other thing, right? People know that with other, like people know that with dogs, and then actually that's not true with humans, right? Because like all the purebred dogs have all the worst diseases and are like unhealthy, have shorter lifespans,
and all
things
the
like
inbred
that.
people have the worst like states.
Yeah. No, and but like, but yeah, like these things are like I actually think way more than, and like we've already had the conversation on sex and chromosomes to some extent, which isn't the focus of tonight. But race and ethnicity is far more malleable, and I think you'd even agree with me on that than sexual characteristics and genetics are.
It's a multimodal distribution. Instead of bimodal, it's multimodal. Like you get certain clusters that make somebody more characteristically from Africa or from Asia or from Europe. And then those sorts of things sort of spread out from the cradle of life, the evolutionary theory, evo bio, or if you're, if you're a Christian as you are, you probably have some sort of belief that they started in one place, that being, the Garden of Eden, and therefore spread out the entire world from that one place, which would mean that there's another cradle of life, or like the cradle of life was always in Africa and that's where the Garden of Eden was, or some similarity to that. But like they all started in one place, and then everything else is variations based on like movement across the planet, migration, which is, one of the reasons God says to not, treat foreigners poorly, because if you do, you're treating people who are essentially just like you poorly, and not allowing them the same grace that God would. So, don't be a dick. But like, basically, go.
Yeah, well, this gets into, I think, like why I like my borders position, my immigration position doesn't fit in a box, right? You could say my immigration position is not like most immigration conversations are in this sort of weird binary space. And for all this talk about like bimodal and multimodal distributions, like my immigration position is not like, it doesn't fit on a bumper sticker, because I'm one of those people that's like, yeah, I don't know that I want to like put my flag in what people call like open borders and say that, because like, me back up a second. What I want is like, we shouldn't have a conversation about what the state does with the border, because I don't want the state to exist and have a
Right.
border to manage. What we do in the meantime, I think, is like, well, we can have a conversation about that and how different, so the phrasing I use for this is that there are particular order and no particular order anarchists. Some who say, I don't really care about like second, third order consequences to a large degree over like what policies and rollbacks and abolishing of state power we do. You just you slash at what is available to slash at, and it doesn't matter. And I'm kind of more sympathetic to the, I think you can't have perfect knowledge to perfectly like plan how to like slash and decentralize and privatize, et cetera, to get to a stateless society. But it doesn't, it does not seem right to me to think that the order is insignificant and without consequence.
So
but just to put a bow on that, that is completely different than me saying, well, what I really want is a giant fascist police state to deport 20 million people or 30 million people
using
or 50 million
Palantir AI.
people. And using AI that like the Israelis do, and then to have a giant, like, I don't know how any right winger who protested the COVID lockdowns can look themselves in the mirror and be advocating for what essentially ensures that the next pandemic or emergency of a national variety that can be used to justify people staying in place. It's like, next time, and the police are going to have way more guns, way more people and resources and infrastructure at their disposal to make sure that you're not able to leave your homes. It's like, so that it's just, it's pure insanity to me what's going on the right with the borders, because but just the fact that I see that nuanced position, it doesn't register on people who are so like caught in some kind of weird right-wing ideologue that like their mental processing basically drops down the troglodyte levels, where like they're just like, you not for closed border, you open border leftist, ooga.
Yeah. And so here's the thing, like, it's always cognitive dissonance with these fucks. So actually I should avoid cussing. I've been on the job site and I cuss all day on there. Like, when I found out I was going to be late, I was just swearing up and down. But this is a Christian channel and I should observe that. So I'll do that. Okay, I'll just switch to Rocket Raccoon speak. These flarks, these people, they decide that, like, certain things only apply to certain people in certain situations. And so, generally speaking, like, if you bring up to them something that they would hate if it was done to them, and that they routinely protest when it's done to them, they suddenly take issue with that. Like, for instance, okay, we can watch all the sovereign citizen videos and all the, the whatever, the right wingers in their cars with their phones going to a checkpoint being like, I don't answer questions. This is this is supposed to be a free country. I'm trying to, be on my way. Am I being detained? All these Gavin Syme types. But like, Gavin Syme is a really reasonable person. So I'm not, comparing him to the worst of the worst. I'm just saying, like, the people who've got their phones out, like, Gavin Syme understands a lot of this because he's seen it first up, like up close and personal. And when you end up with like this sort of mentality, you end up with this mentality that, oh yeah, you know what? The government does have tyranny and the tyranny is bad. But it's only bad when it happens to me. Not Gavin, by the way. And just he's the first person I thought of. But like, there are tons of right wingers who don't like being accosted at various checkpoints. They don't like, especially within the country. They don't like, when they come back into the country after they, they leave for a bit. They have to display their ID. They think that this is tyranny. And then you bring up to them, well, maybe we should get rid of the 100-mile Constitution free zone, and they flip. They are not okay with that. They are suddenly on board with the unconstitutional tyranny that affects like 2/3 of the citizens of this country. Because when you say that maybe we should start to roll back measures that help with the deportations, they're suddenly like, well, gosh darn it, now I don't care. And so it's like that. It's like, with these people, with the way that they are, and especially when you get into more of the Nazi camp, which N of One is one of those, even though he tries to pretend that he's not. Like when you start to get into these camps, they start to tell you things are tyranny when, the Democrats are doing it, when it's the left doing it, when they can blame communism. But when it's, when you start to suggest that maybe Trump is behaving in just as authoritarian a manner, they excuse it. And he did that in this this stream, which you can still watch. Like, I'm gonna try and find a way to cross-upload the stream, because it's now hidden behind a paywall, and so people should be able to see it. You can still, by the way, if you wanted to, pull up the stream in the Telegram chat, or during this call, I could upload it. But basically, he was making excuse after excuse. And let me tell you, one of the fun things that he said that I thought was absolutely hilarious was that the reason Trump shouldn't release the Epstein files is that even being close to Epstein in a photo or in one of these documents might derail the deportations that are taking place. And so he shouldn't be held accountable for potentially raping kids because he's, deporting the people that this guy doesn't like. And the best part is, like, here's the hilarious thing. This guy's a Jew. Like, he's said this on multiple occasions in the Telegram chat and elsewhere. And he's had to have, like, his co-founder of Liberty Plus, the Nazi recruitment organization, Justin Keith, run cover for him. Because Justin's like, oh, well, he's not a subversive Jew. So that means he's okay. It's like respectability politics. It's like having your black person who hates black people, and you're like, well, he's one of the good ones. He's on our side. He'll be of use.
Well, it's like for the which this isn't to defend Trump, but it's like when you have the neoliberals and like the neocons and establishment, left right cronies, and then when the Democrats were, and I guess there still are, like in the heyday of their being anti-Trump, but generally for like not the right reasons, just kind of having what is, I think, a legitimate Trump derangement syndrome, at least to a large extent. And then they'll run into a right winger who then they'll be like, oh, that person's right winger. It's like, yeah, but like, oh, but they hate Trump, right? Like they're not a Trumper, right? It's the same kind of like
Joe Walsh.
Yeah, that's a good example of what I'm talking about here. There's a certain sliminess to all that, and to this whole like the whole like, so Cody had a comment which I think is, how much immigration should the murder, death, and rape cult control is the right way to frame this. And I think that there's this, so I want to paint a little, like, I'm going to front load this a bit. As I kind of alluded to in my answer about immigration, I think there are valid concerns, which right-wingers have, and I have, about immigration affecting the culture. Like, because it's not immediately apparent to me that if you were to import, millions of people from second and third world countries, that doesn't have, like, again, especially if it's happening in a way that's not like some kind of free market outcome. If you have, NGOs and to some extent people coming here because of, now this is sometimes our government's fault, right? But they're, reacting to all sorts of problems at home from their government and our government and Western government interventions and imperialism and things like that, and the war on drugs. And we can say, hey, that stuff needs to stop and criticize it. It's not immediately apparent to me that if you have, let's say you had like 10, 20 million, Indians move here. And I know there were exaggerations about like the Haitians that moved here, but they did cause some issues in some areas. I think there's legitimate concerns about that. But on the flip side, if you're going to come to me and say, we have to, join together to fight the left because we have to preserve Western culture and Western values and Christian values. And the way to preserve Western culture and liberty and Christianity is to advocate for the most anti-liberty, anti-Christian policies imaginable. I don't take you seriously. Like, I just don't.
Yeah.
Like what, to quote a man much wiser than me, what profit a man if he gains, the world, or in this case, his nation, but loses his soul? Like, what?
Right.
I don't care about America if America, like, I really, I've never cared about America that much for the same reason I don't care about race, because I'm not loyal to nations or to stars and stripes or flags or any of that.
Right.
But if I'm, but like, if I try to be charitable, I could care about America if America actually stood for something like liberty and Christian values. But you can't, it's like at some point you have to actually show me that you are going to walk the walk of these values you claim you're trying to defend.
Yeah.
And for 99.99% of these people, they're walking someone's values, but they're not Christ's.
Well, and here's the thing, like, the right is so immensely cucked. And one of the ways that they're cucked is that they consistently defend capitalism as a concept, and in its execution. And the reason I'm saying this is, if you want free markets, there has never been a completely free market in this country, ever. It has always been at least somewhat on the backs of people who are being involuntarily extracted in one way or another. Whether that be slavery in the past, like, company towns, or a variety of other sorts of like centralized control mechanisms. Like, there have been a significant amount of problems with the way that business has been conducted. Now, the modern way that this is,
by the way, I completely agree with everything you're saying, and I don't think that it's at all a uniquely, like, you have to be a leftist to agree with that analysis.
Rothbard was saying this like real early on. So, like, here's the thing, like, if you like start from that like completely reasonable and realistic premise, the other half of that is, in the modern day, basically every major corporation is not only interconnected with every other major corporation to the point where they're not going to do anything to significantly rock the boat because all of their index funds are interlaced. But, and all of their corporate hierarchies and structures and all that stuff, if you invest in a corporation, you are a minority stakeholder. You are a tiny little fragment, and you are not going to wag that dog by getting a bunch of people to invest, because the people who run the index funds will just like start investing more so that they maintain their majority stakeholders like shares in what you're looking at. BlackRock, Blackstone, and all that, Fidelity, like all these like major corporations that are responsible for like owning things on a structural level. And like, it's not just them. It's the fact that all of these like businesses are also similarly cross-invested through supporting the index funds. Everybody's connected. It's one giant web. And if one node goes down, they can quickly seal that up. They can quickly patch it up. It's one of the reasons that, that asset sales is such a predatory market. It's one of the reasons that lots of liquidation and private equity and all this other stuff where they're like trying to say, oh yeah, we'll streamline your business. And what they really mean is we'll bleed everything until it collapses, and then we'll sell the assets out from under you. And we'll do it all, under strict contractual arrangements so that you can't do anything about it. Like, we'll do all of this because we can, and because this is the way that the system manages itself. It's the way that it patches itself up. It's the way that it closes weaknesses and maintains strength and money and power, siphoning and funneling to the top. And the reason I'm bringing all that up is because of that, they can get away with a ton of unreasonable business practices, like, for instance, the H-1B abuse, where they're, I don't use the term import because I think that, treats humans too much like goods. And I don't think they're being imported. I think they're coming here because their country is in destitution and BRICS is in shambles, and they, want a chance to bring something back to their families in the form of remittances. So it's like I don't remember where I heard this, and it sucks because I was just thinking, I was just watching this presentation on it. If I remember, which I'll try to look it up before the thing, before the end of this, I'll see if I can remember what the actual video was. But they compared it to the military. They compared it to the military where, basically, people go join the military. They have, their stint, and then they come back and they have a bunch of money for the people that they care about and the things that they want to do if they survive. And it's sort of like that with the H-1B program. They endure a ton of abuse. They endure, conditions because basically, Flesh Simulator. I was watching his video on jobs.now. Great channel, by the way. And basically, because of the way that the H-1B program and the fact that it's not an authentic visa and that it's not a green card. Well, it's not a green card. It's a visa, but it's not a green card. It's not an actual permission to be here as a protected person. The fact that they're basically here on a work visa means that the companies can do basically whatever they want, because if you upset the apple cart too much, you will be deported. And so deportation is their threat. They can't, whip them anymore. They can't they can't do open slavery directly where it's brutal like Django. They got to do it surreptitiously, where these people are controlled by the threat of deportation and they are not allowed to rise up. And because of that, these, businesses that do this sort of thing have an incentive to get as many of these people over here or in jobs that are related to over here as possible, in some foreign call center or whatever, things like that. And the reason that jobs.now is such a significant thing, and again, this a great breakdown of it is on Flesh Simulator's channel, and the reason jobs.now is such a stick in the eye of this program is because they legally have to list the job and see if a domestic American is just as capable of doing it before they can hire an H-1B. But these jobs were being put into tiny little places that barely anybody could see, so that you could say that, oh well, we did it, but they were still going to hire the H-1B person. And so basically you can subvert all of that and put a stick in the eye of these exploitative businesses by just going and applying at jobs.now. Now, there's a lot of people doing this for nationalist reasons. There's even some Nazis supporting this because, it'll help with the deportations. So I'm not a fan of that. But the fact that this is even possible as a framework is insane. So, like, the reason the H-1B program exists is the same reason so many migrants are coming over here from Mexico, from Yemen, from Somalia, from all these other, because their places suck, partially due to, American interventionism, regime change, politicking from countries that are
Well,
protected by
hold
Western
on.
hegemony.
Blaming America is also a leftist thing now, I've heard.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
yeah.
You can't take any personal responsibility. This place is perfect, and the only thing that's like bad about it is the Browns. As long as we get de-brownify, as the Nazis I've been exposing say, then we'll be a fucking awesome country again.
There's something kind of contradictory in a lot of right-wing mindsets, which doesn't make sense to me, where on one hand they will sort of so again there's the hypocrisy of like like we have the superior cultures, right? It's like I don't get too caught up in like sort of like pumping my chest about our superior culture while we bomb brown people halfway across the world,
Yeah.
or fund Israel to do it. But on top of that, it's like I think that the arguments about blowback and the extent to which all these foreign interventions from our government, which by the way, which I'm sure you'll agree with, they don't just amount to the military ones, and that doesn't mean the military ones aren't
Right.
brutal and horrible, and but there's plenty of, just as our government does economic sort of like sabotaging domestically, they do it abroad too, through sanctions and all sorts of manipulations of trade and things like that. So
let me ask, have you read Shock Doctrine by Naomi Klein?
Yeah.
Yeah, please, everybody, go out there, read that tonight. Like, you probably can't, but like,
you're right, yeah.
start it.
There's a long, like I've studied, the shock therapy that happened in the after the breakdown of the USSR. I mean, there's just there is so much, like just like our military operations are like, we're spreading freedom. Our economic ones are often, they're couched in similar terms, but what we're doing is it's should be intuitive to libertarians, anarchists, right? Because it's the state doing it, interfering with. I want to respond. Well, let me finish this one thread I was saying, and then I want to say something else quick. But
real quick, one other book, Friendly Fascism by Bertram Gross. I have to.
I've heard of that. I haven't read that, but I just think that it's funny that we like, if you're going to say that society isn't like a blank slate and all cultures aren't equal, people aren't equal to each other, which I tend to agree with. It's like, then to me that makes the argument for the impact that these interventions, economic and military, are going to have. Like, it's going to exemplify, it's going to amplify, it's going to exaggerate those problems, right? Like I'm a Christian. I don't really hold a lot of like warm feelings or like I don't get out of bed and when I'm debating people about Israel's war on Hamas and Gaza, I'm not a Islam apologist, right? And I think that there are things about Islam which, certainly, as much as I'm not on the Israeli side, there are things about that religion, especially as it's played out in the Middle East and in certain fundamentalist sects, that I think are worthy of critique. But it's like, hey, you know what doesn't help this problem, right? Like if you have a problem of religious fanaticism, it turns out that bombing people and starving them through economic sanctions and interventions is actually a really bad way to disincentivize people from becoming radicalized into these various groups and factions. So,
and like the other half of that is like, well, congratulations, you live in an allegedly free country that's worth defending at every single second. Like, America, rah rah, we got it, we're the number one, even though we're not, and basically every category disagrees with that, and we're free, even though we've got all these lack of freedom things that have, been increasingly less free for a long period of time. Yeah, America, we're so cool and good, and you should be like us. And in order to demonstrate our liberal free values, we will crush your democratic elections. We will unseat anybody who happens to be gaining power we don't like in your local regions. We will, bomb your children. We will enable those who bomb your children. We will enable those who rape your children. We will do all of these things, the UN and, all these task forces that, oh, whoops, another group of peacekeepers did some not so peaceful things. If you really want to convince people that liberalism is a peaceful and morally superior alternative, now's the time. Let's start. Let's get that on the schedule.
What's funny is, and although, after 1913 and the that certain things in America went downhill, there's evidence that kind of what you just sort of highlighted at least started to manifest in the early 20th century, where America was seen by a lot of parts of the world as like, oh yeah, like they're the force of good and freedom in the world, right? Like, especially compared to like the Brits and all the colonialism of Europe, they were, people in the Middle East, other parts of the world were like, oh yeah, we love America. They were like rooting on this experiment. And I think that, so my friend Casimir in the comments, I think Casimir, he was kind of complaining a little bit about the way you characterized the like America, even in its earliest conception was never free. There's never been a free market. But I think like two things can be true at the same time. That like if we're kind of like evaluating these things on a scale, like I think you would agree that there are parts of the American experiment, pre 1913, pre the New Deal, that were freer than we have today and generated at least some measure of industrialization and generation of wealth that had some positive impacts. I think you can simultaneously, you can do kind of a both and. You can go, hey, all the good parts of sort of like American growth economically in the 1800s and early 1900s came from the extent to which we had elements of a free market system in place, while simultaneously recognizing that like it wasn't, like 100% there. Because when you dive deep into the weeds of even American history, like it's not, it tends to be like, again, this is nuance, right? Like it's not as cartoonishly bad as maybe you're like a communist history teacher might try to portray it as, but sometimes like and I love, like I've read things from like Tom Woods and other libertarian historians who have done kind of like the libertarian retelling of American history to make it look really good. And I tend to think like, what, like each side can kind of be cherry picking stuff to a little bit. Like for as much as you can say that a good example is that like there were company towns, right?
Yeah.
Like I don't have to sit here and pretend company towns didn't exist and that they weren't kind of a bad thing. To also recognize that like there were also like good things about the well, and that even the bad things tended to be like when there was like monopolies and whatnot, that was still kind of a function of the state. But like that doesn't take anything away from the argument for the free market. That just goes like, hey, like we like I would say, if I was gonna like take a guess, that like we were maybe like halfway there to a free market. And even though there were problems, there was a lot of good that came from it. And it seems like as we've made things less free, the problems people point to, it's kind of funny. Like when you like, you think about it, like all the liberal history teachers talk about the Gilded Age, and it's how like the failures of free market capitalism, but like it's been like all of the problems that you hear about from like that time period that they blame on capitalism. It's like we have those problems in droves today. Like we don't have a free market right now. Like we have giant regulatory capture, like giant firms that basically buy up tons of property and smaller businesses and whatnot, and it's enabled by lots of things, enabled by regulation, enabled by the state fiat currency system, enabled by just the fact that the state buys up a bunch of unhomesteaded land and forestalls anyone from actually homesteading it. I mean, there's so many there's just so much there to get into. But anyway, I'll let you give you a chance to respond because I kind of I kind of went on a rant there.
Yeah, like I'm the last one to complain about that. I talk forever. So the thing is here, like, there does not need to be a 100% free market or a free market at all for like the elements of the market that are free to do good things. I would disagree that the vast amount of progress was done by the free market, because like the Transcontinental Railroad murdered, raped, and otherwise tortured a lot of Indians, damaged a lot of properties that were built along the railroad, and there was a whole bunch of corporate corruption, and the reason they existed to begin with was with help from the US government and various cavalries, and the whole thing kept on having like so much corruption that they literally, I mean, it's not 100%, I mean, there's a lot of stuff that they embellished and some stuff that they directly added, but Hell on Wheels is a show, and you can watch like they made a whole show out of like the corruption of the Transcontinental Railroad. And so like that's just one aspect. It's just one of the many ways.
Isn't it? It's almost like, so America was kind of first settled through kind of like a colonial kind of framework. And then there's kind of an element of America's expansion west, which is almost just like colonialism 2.0.
Yes, Manifest Destiny.
Yeah, Manifest Destiny is just colonialism 2.0.
Yeah.
Instead of going across the ocean or, there's not, because like, so like I agree with you. Like you can, I tend to, this is why I said I tend to think that if you kind of look at everything objectively and soberly, you kind of end up in the middle where like there's a lot to complain about, but there are also good things that you can point to at the same time. But then you have to compare that to the status quo to be like, hey, so now let's compare that to where we are now, and we have less freedom and more government. How's that working out for us?
Or it's just been distributed more evenly since they no longer have a slave population that they can directly point to. Because here's the thing. Now they have to hide slavery. They have to hide it in, taxation. They have to hide it in the prison system, where like they basically have a forced cast of inmates that's Jim Crow never really got abolished. And we've got like, Mayor Bloomberg saying, you can Xerox a description and throw black and brown kids against the wall. The fact that like they never really got their acres and a mule. The fact that they, when they try to establish themselves, they're bombed in the form of Philadelphia Move, or their entire business like center is torched in the burning of Black Wall Street. And this is just black people, right? The Japanese had everything they had taken from them, and they were forced into these concentration camps, and that's exactly what they are. And if anybody tells you differently, they deserve very nice and legal things to happen to them. But like generally speaking,
my favorite insult lately that you can say without getting in trouble, it's like, I hope your phone charger port never works except when you hold the charger cord at a weird angle.
Yeah. Well, like there's the fact that Mexicans have been held back for a really long time based on like age-old policies, like vestiges and artifacts from the Mexican-American War, and a bunch of other things, like where maybe there's been a freer market historically for a certain group of people, but like there's like if you were a woman, you couldn't even vote until like this last century. If you were a black person, you couldn't hold property until very recently. Like, if we're real about distribution, if we're real about what an actual free market is, this market was never free, because there was always restrictions on either who could participate in it or what the results would be if they tried. And so, like, if we want to be real, we have to say that while there are certain things to keep from the ideas, the execution was awful. It was terrible. And anybody who like insists otherwise is not only being anti-Christian and anti-anarchist, but also myopic and somewhat stupid. So that's what I'll say about that.
Yeah, no, I really agree with pretty much all of that. I mean, I think that, like I recently did an episode, I think it was episode 101, where the title was, Is America the Bad Guy? And I kind of like, I started with recent history and wars and interventions and just kept going, like, first I was going back like decade by decade, and then I started going more like big chunks and going like, 20th century and 18th century. And yeah, I mean, there's a lot of crap from the Spanish American War and the taking from Mexico, from stuff that went down with Cuba, obviously the Native Americans. I mean, even, and like, this is a bit third rail sacred cow stuff, but like, and I'm actually writing about this right now in the LCI, well, both in my book that you know about and in another book I'm helping to write for LCI. But like, the American Revolution is not perfectly libertarian or Christian.
And it's not even independent. Like, the Whiskey Rebellion was a perfect example of this. You can't have a rebellion like against the taxation that is welding your country's interests to that of France, and then crush that with not only a campaign of libel and subversion and open like conflict, and then eventually crush the final aspect of it by sending a multi-state militia led by George Washington of 13,000 people to crush a tax rebellion so that you can pay back France, and then tell me that this is an independent country. Don't do that. It's just lies.
There's also just so much mythologizing. I mean, George Washington was, well, first of all, not that it really matters to my point, but he was a horrible general, which that upsets a lot of people when you tell them. But like, but like, I as much as I hate war, I've always been fascinated by like, just like studying wars and the military strategies. And like, here's the thing. Actually, this ties into your thing about France. If George had not been given as much leeway as he had been, not been made general, and I forget the other guy's name, but the other general, the other general was the one who kind of did most of got the most of the victories early on. And if he had had his way, they could have actually beat the British much earlier and without the French's help. But Washington just was a pretty, like, he's one of those guys that like he kind of had like one or two good moments that get remembered and then the rest suck. But then as a president, I mean, right, everyone wants to talk about like, oh, he was so good by like immediately setting the precedent to step down after 2 terms and all that. I was like, yeah, he also set the precedent of using federal power to enrich himself and get land for himself. And
hey, I've got a soundbite for you based on what you just said. That's going to piss off everybody you know.
Oh boy,
George Washington is Steve Jobs. He just comes out and has a figurehead, and oh yeah, you know what? We did great, didn't we? And it's like, maybe not we.
Yeah, no, it's just like, but people don't let. So this is my problem, right? I I have kind of cognitive dissonance on this, and I'll explain why. Because I know my audience, because I live in America, I desperately want to not be anti-America. I want to like leave room to kind of be like, okay, like there are things in the Declaration of Independence that are very good. There are ideas that influenced the American Revolution, pamphlets that were written, like Common Sense. Then there was, I forget the other guy who wrote one about kind of more of a Christian argument for why resistance to tyranny and the British government was good. Like there are things that like I can point to and find that are good. I think the way you put it was kind of apt, that like there are good things and they were very limitedly applied, right? So like there were some freedoms that were in some good strains, but they weren't universally distributed to all people groups from the start. But my problem is that why do we need this middleman of America? Why can't we just bypass it and just talk about the good ideas? Why can't we just talk about liberty and independence and liberalism and property rights and social cooperation? Like, why do we have to use America as a foil to be like, America stands for these things? It's like, kind of doesn't.
Yeah, well,
and it kind of never did, and it never has, and maybe we want it to. But the problem is, like, even the people who want to, right? Like Martin Luther King saying that, like, I have a dream that one day, my kids will be judged by the content of their character, not the color of their skin, that America will, I'm paraphrasing here, that like it'll live up to its creeds and whatnot. Like, I get wanting to couch things in that way, but just too often America becomes a golden calf that people idolize, and they can't actually see the problems.
Right. And here's another little soundbite. The only good founder was Thomas Paine. That's it. He was it. He was the only one to actually fully support rebellion.
Here's a soundbite. If Thomas Paine was alive today, he'd be called a leftist.
Yes. and literally,
Libertarian Party of New Hampshire would call Thomas Paine a leftist if he was writing today.
Yeah, and here's the fun part about that. Literally, because and they wouldn't be wrong, because to answer Casimir's earlier dumb thing, like the general gist of right wing is, do you side with the king? In this case, we have a king. He's literally trying to usurp all of this stuff. And the original French thing was, do you side with the king?
Yes.
Or do you side with the revolution? And in this particular case, the revolution is against Trump. And in the previous case, Thomas Paine supported the revolution, which means Thomas Paine, the only good founding father, was a leftist by definition. He literally supported such a strong sense of freedom for the French people that when the U.S. told him, like, to get bent, basically, he went over there to help them. He's awesome. Be like Thomas Paine, not George Washington, and you might get some freedom.
Yeah, no, I love Thomas Paine. I think, so we talked about this on Monday. We had a live stream with me, Alex, and Cody, and we talked, is libertarianism left wing or right wing? And historically, yeah, like you're 100% right that the origins of these words are basically, were you in defense of or in opposition to the monarchies? And so in that sense, classical liberalism and libertarianism have their roots in what would be called left wing. I guess like the modern landscape tends to kind of talk about, are you for, are like left is considered or associated more with like an egalitarian sort of ethos, and right wing is associated more with like a hierarchical kind of ethos, and maybe a little bit on top of that, the left is associated more with kind of like open creativity, slightly more chaotic ethos, and the right's kind of associated more with like sort of like, order and borders to some extent. And I think to some extent, and this was like Jordan Peterson at his best in his heyday, not so much as of late, would talk about the necessity of both the left and the right as sort of like equally balancing them out. Now I'm a
Checks on
Christian,
one
but
another.
um they it's kind of like the Taoist idea of like the yin yang, right? Like I'm a
Right.
Christian, I don't really buy that, but it's kind of like the way I, by the way, just a tangent, I don't mind borrowing observations from uh other religions or even atheist philosophers, because I think all truth is God's truth, and I think that people can discover things that are true from natural law and natural revelation, and those things aren't going to contradict what I find in the Bible, which I think is special revelation. But yeah, I think that to some extent that uh I tend to kind of think about anarchy sometimes primarily in terms of it's the natural order and the
Yeah.
like people organizing in natural hierarchies without fiat, without coercion, and that I think the state is chaos. The state is disorder and whatnot.
And
But
real
there
quick,
is
just to, because I want to make sure that this doesn't get lost. It would be supreme arrogance for any alleged Christian to pretend that like God and Jesus and like the Godhead, they would stop their revelations after those books were written and after they were compiled. The idea that you cannot discover more truth now, because these books were written then, and that's the only observable and discoverable truth, and that's the only thing you ever need to know, is the arrogance and the condescension to God himself, that he would not have a more explorable universe and a more like broadly understandable schema than that which can fit in that tiny bound piece of paper. You are spitting in God's face if you insist that the Bible is all that's to be known. Go. Sorry.
yeah, that's interesting because I can nitpick at that. There's things I could agree. Depends on the extent to which you take that statement, because I think on one hand, obviously the Bible is not an exhaustive piece of literature for how to like it doesn't explain how to live through all aspects of life, right? Even like you need knowledge and the pursuit of knowledge and truth outside of the Bible to even do the things in the Bible. Like, first of all, you need to learn how to read the Bible.
Which
The Bible doesn't teach you how to read.
Which was held against people for a really long time because
yes,
we're the gilded gentry. We've been taught to read. We won't teach you how to read, and we'll then tell you what the Bible says, and it doesn't actually say this, but we're going to make it up, and
but
we're
by
going to.
the way, I love my Catholic brothers and sisters, but there is just kind of, listen, correlation isn't causation. But there's this weird correlation with the printing press and wide distribution of Bibles and the Protestant Reformation. I'm just going to put that out there. Just putting that out there, okay? So, I think I said this in a podcast recently. The Bible instructs us as Christians to go and care for the least of these, to go build churches and to build facilities for the widows and for the orphans and for the poor, but it doesn't tell you how to do that. Like, you need to study architecture and science and things like that to carry out a lot of these mandates. Now, when it comes to like spiritual truths or religious truths, I mean, so I'm a Christian, like in the sense of like I'm not a like liberal Christian. I'm more like of an Orthodox Christian, and I do think that the only way to the Father, to sort of like the truest understanding of God. What?
You're not many roads. You're the way is narrow.
Yeah, exactly. But that doesn't mean that people from other religions and worldviews and philosophies cannot get glimpses of the divine. Even in the Bible, there were people outside of, like in the Old Covenant, people outside of Israel who would have experiences with God, who would have knowledge of God, who sometimes God would like send those people to Israel to like correct them, right? So I think that this is again one of those things where I want to be careful to not like, you know, leave things so wide open as to be relativistic, but I don't want to be so closed off and minded and fisted on this that like I become an authoritarian or tyrannical in you know in a way. And really this is another good example of I think that kind of balancing of sort of left and right energies in a way, or like patterns, you know, ways of thinking of the world, ways of being. Because I described anarchy in a very right-wing way, but you can also describe anarchy and liberty in ways that would sound more left-leaning. Like I think that they're often kind of like saying the same things from different positions. Like
And-
I can, on one hand, when I'm talking about war, I am parsing out war not in terms of like, well, this is very disruptive to markets and order and property rights and
No,
things
it
like,
is.
which it is, but I'm going, hey, like, you know, you're the empire and we're the rebel alliance, right? I'm like, hey, you know, you're blowing up innocent people. You are you know, tyrants
In
and
service of
satanic
mammon.
yeah, you are satanic evil forces of darkness which need to be
Purged.
purged, right? Like you need to be driven out with
Whips.
with whips, right? Thank you for finishing my sentences.
See, I'm tired, but I'm not. I'm also caffeinated, so that's a problem for everybody.
And I don't think that I need, again, so this gets to where like I often, you know, I don't think anyone who you know, knows me, who listens to my content is coming away going like, you know, Jacob's some left winger, but I'm also not like some like my identity is that I'm on the right and I have to like check off some weird like purity test, like check boxes to prove my right wing credentials or whatnot. Like that just again, like these people to the extent I don't know, you might know this. I think N of one at least pretends to flirt with some kind of like nominal Christianity, which that you know, if he does, and to the extent that which he and others like him do that, really pisses me off. Because to me, they're taking the name of the Lord in vain. They're taking my faith in vain when they, you know, try to LARP as Christian while they show that they you know they only serve one master, as Jesus said.
Yeah, well, and just to like, because Hodie's not in this conversation, and I know that he would want this to be read, I'm just gonna, and also because, like I keep telling people, Matthew shreds, and it pisses off all the right people when I start reading Matthew. So I'm gonna say like, if ye then being evil know how to give good gifts unto your children, how much more shall your Father which is in heaven give good things to them that ask him? Therefore, all things whatsoever ye would that men should do to you, do ye even so to them. For this is the law and the prophets. Enter ye in at the strait gate, for wide is the gate, and broad is the way that leadeth to destruction, and many there be which go in thereat. Because strait is the gate, and narrow is the way which leadeth unto life, and few there be that find it. Beware of false prophets, which come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ravening wolves. Ye shall know them by their fruits. Do men gather grapes of thorns or figs of thistles? Even so, every good tree bringeth forth good fruit, but a corrupt tree bringeth forth evil fruit. A good tree cannot bring forth evil fruit, neither can a corrupt tree bring forth good fruit. Every tree that bringeth not forth good fruit is hewn down and cast into the fire. Wherefore by their fruits ye shall know them. And here's the thing to the previous thing. Not every one that saith unto me, Lord, Lord, shall enter into the kingdom of heaven, but he that doeth the will of my Father which is in heaven. Doeth the will. Yep. Many will say to me in that day, Lord, Lord, have we not prophesied in thy name, and in thy name have cast out devils, and in thy name have done many wonderful works? And then I will profess unto them, I never knew you. Depart from ye, ye that work iniquity. Now, here's the thing. What that all means is there is a very specific way to follow Christ, but that many of the people who claim to be doing so are doing so to serve themselves. They're doing so to serve like unholy entities. They're doing so to serve like unholy desires and ideas and mentalities. They're doing so to corrupt the word. And in doing so, in Revelation speak, they will be stricken from the book of life. And ultimately speaking, a lot of those people are further away from Christ than some of the other cultures that would, become closer
Yeah.
if you actually looked at what they were saying. And as James says, faith without works is dead. You must do.
Yeah.
If
Well,
they're
I got
doing
the
these things, then they're maybe closer than quite a few Christians that don't do these things and don't actually walk the path you're supposed to.
I got one here that I think will be my final statement, and then I'll kind of give you a final word before we hop off because it is getting late. But quoting from the great book of Matthew, which I agree, Matthew is the goat. And I'm going to read the passage of the sheep and the goat. Although in this context, goat isn't a good thing. When the Son of Man comes in his glory and all the angels with him, he will sit on a glorious throne. All the nations will be gathered before him, and he will separate people one from another as a shepherd separates sheep from the goats. He will put the sheep on his right and the goats on his left. And the king will say to those on his right, "Come, you who are blessed by my Father, take your inheritance, the kingdom prepared for you since the creation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger," maybe like a foreigner in a foreign land or an immigrant, I don't know, "and you invited me in." Interesting. "I needed clothes, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you looked after me. I was in prison, and you came to visit me." In prison, that means you broke the law. Oh God. Anyway, and then the righteous will answer him, "Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you something to drink? When did we see you a stranger and invite you in, or needing clothes and clothe you? When did we see you sick or in prison and go to visit you?" And the king will reply, "Truly I tell you, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me." And then he will say to those on the left, "Depart from me, you who are cursed, into the eternal fire prepared for the devil and his angels. For I was hungry, and you gave me nothing to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me nothing to drink. I was a stranger, and you did not invite me in. I needed clothes, and you did not clothe me. I was sick and in prison, and you did not look after me." And they will also will answer, "Lord, when did we see you hungry or thirsty, or a stranger, or needing clothes, or sick or in prison, and did not help you?" And he will reply, "Truly I tell you, whatever you did not do for one of the least of these, you did not do for me." Then they will go away to eternal punishment, but the righteous to eternal life. And if your average Christian nationalist heard a speech like that and didn't know their Bible, they'd be like, "Oh, what kind of woke leftist blue-pilled soy boy crap is that?" It's like, that's the guy you claim to be your Lord and Savior. Maybe read what he has to say once in a while.
Yeah, and here's the other half of that, right? When it comes down to it, the reason all of this is started off, speaking of false prophets, the reason all of this, like the reason we had this stream today, there are false prophets in the liberty movement. There are false prophets in Christianity. There are false prophets in the right who claim the ideals of freedom and righteousness and liberty and all of that other stuff. But when it comes down to it, they're here to control you. N of one, Liberty Plus, the reason I knew about their organization to begin with was because I was maybe close to a year ago, trying to find the old anarcho-fascism archives from Nullius Maximus, I think was his name, or maybe Nullus. And Matthew Reese, I think was his actual name. And so this guy, wrote a bunch of articles about how to be a fascist libertarian, how to be a fascist anarchist. And they were delusional when you actually read them. And so when I sort of looked for his articles, I found out, oh, they're not there. And I couldn't find his actual blog. I couldn't find his Twitter. I couldn't find what I was looking for. And unlike you two, I kept looking. And then I found it on another site called Liberty Plus. And that led me down this gigantic rabbit hole where I was like, oh man, this organization is evil. And these people, blood, wealth, and soil, Justin Keith, this eugenicist Nazi who's like at like the funded the whole thing, or N of One, who heretofore I did not know what he looked like. I didn't know his name. I think I got both of those now, though. Like ultimately speaking, when this person was speaking on Gab and various other places, I was like, yeah, I know exactly what you're doing. And I saw on his website, and we're not Nazis, we're not fascists. But the whole reason I found the place to begin with was because he was cataloging fascism from people like Nullis and Christopher Chase Rachels and a bunch of other people like that.
Oh man, CCR, not the good one.
and so like I found all these terrible people being like basically archived and preserved at this website, and that's the reason it was on my radar. So when I kept apprised, because I started to follow actively the Telegram channel associated with it, when I kept apprised and I found out that these people were directly affiliated with the Libertarian Party of New Hampshire, I was like, I'm going to keep a close eye on this relationship, because this relationship is going to result in some actual terrible things. Not the least of which is the fact that if you're trying to actually actively recruit with an organization that has a bunch of members that say things like keep New England white and a bunch of Nazi slogans and a bunch of things like that, and when these people are in their siege masks, sieg heiling in the middle of the snowy wilderness, doing their alleged guerrilla warfare training, I promise that's exactly what it was. Because they're basically none of us are actually fit. None of us actually have muscle mass. None of us are on our dietary game. And so they met up. I can only find once that they actually met up and did their guerrilla warfare training, which was just them in their Meal Team 6 outfits in the middle of the snow. Siege masks and all, which for anybody who doesn't know is if you see a skull neck gaiter or bandana or something like that, there's a strong likelihood you're dealing with a Nazi who's following, I forget the author right now, but this guy who wrote a book called Siege. And so basically, I started to really keep a close eye on these people. And since I've kept an eye on them, I've watched them stream with a variety of right-wing influencers who have connections to the more anti-SJW, anti-woke grift section of YouTube and various other places. But also, eventually, they sponsored the Libertarian Party of New Hampshire's convention. And the Libertarian Party of New Hampshire gave them a half-page ad on one side of the booklet, after in the beginning of it saying that, listing them in the sponsors segment, and right next to that half-page ad was a full-page ad saying, a version of the 14 words, but about libertarians. That is especially concerning given the fact that N of One has a posting history of saying 1488 unironically. And the fact that this ad was right next to this Nazi is a problem if you're not a Nazi. But the people who run the Libertarian Party of New Hampshire are Nazis. Those people have an evil agenda to control people who aren't like them. They are anti-Christian, they are anti-libertarian, and the whole reason they went after Jacob was because he's not quite doing with his right-wingism what they want him to. And that's what you need to know about these sorts of people. They will only champion your whiteness if you, as a white person, are doing their bidding. If you are not doing their labor for them, you are not valuable to them. They will not support me as a white man because I'm white. They will not support me as a Scottish German blood person with, I'm pretty sure, 0 Jewish genetics. They won't support me because I'm not doing exactly what they want me to, which is support their garbage LARP. I was going to start swearing. I'm not going to do that because the channel I'm on. They need to realize that the only people this appeals to are the kinds of people who will throw them under the bus, because these people require a purity spiral of the most social justice warrior Tumblr adjacent like degree, just the most screeching identitarian like mentality of just like, I am going to shove my whiteness down your throat, and if you don't swallow, I will smack a hoe. Like, these people, if they don't like have you doing exactly what they want, will try to hurt you, will try to undermine you, will try to destroy your movements, will call you a leftist even when you're not. They will undermine every single aspect of what you tried to accomplish if you're undermining the essence of what they want to say by being somebody who is of their racial group and does not do exactly what they want. And that is why they're influencing the Libertarian Party, because it provides a nice little recruitment mechanism where they can claim that this is liberty because white people are the only ones. Oh, by the way, forget that N of 1 is a Jew. Go ahead.
Well, I guess you were wrong at the beginning when they said, well, N of 1's a Jew, but he's okay because he's not a subversive Jew. Clearly, he's a very subversive Jew.
Yeah. And like
to play a trope for obviously a joke for fun. No, I think next time we'll get on, hopefully we can have more time to prep and do a little bit deeper dive into some of this stuff, because it's definitely on my radar now, because I didn't listen to that whole stream, but I listened to enough to kind of get like, basically I don't have this to play, but essentially what N of 1 said about Nazis and the other guy, Martinez, both agreed was that, like, well, the problem with Nazis was that, like, well, it's too hard to sell with that label.
And it's also not realistic. And actually, if you wanted to do something that would piss them off, you could share my edit of their stream, because I'm pretty sure that's one of the reasons that this live is no longer available in that form.
Because I took clips of it and posted it, and I wonder if they noticed that and responded to that, the fact that like people who give a shit are watching, because it's just like, I mean,
they used to a little echo chamber on Rumble. Here, I'll send you this. I would advise playing this just so that people can see his guest from Liberty Plus is exactly who he claims to be against. N of 1 is exactly the kind of person he says we should not be like, and he still promotes N of 1. So he's either being dishonest on one end of it or the other. But you can't say all of this stuff and then say that N of 1 is a good example of what you're trying to accomplish. I sent it in, yeah.
Yeah, Woodpit says, and it's all online. They do not act that way in their real life. Yeah, but even if it's not online, the ones that do go out in public, they do kind of act in the schizoid way over there. They put on the skull masks and they march around and they have signs that say the N-word and stuff. Like, I feel like these guys they're pretty much just addicted to some kind of media spectacle show where they just do provocative stuff to get the media to point cameras at them, and then once they get that media attention, they weaponize it to grift, to plop down the GoFundMe or whatever. We've seen a couple people push that. I mean, we see a lot of that actually now. Like, these people like say the N-word in public, and then up goes the GoFundMe. Give me $500K, man. Right? Like, they noticed that one that happened with that one chick in America. She got like $800K for saying the N-word, and now everybody's trying to repeat the thing to get rich. So I feel like the American scene has just evolved into a lot of clownery, and it's not totally serious, and it's definitely not organized, and it's just super black-pilled.
I wonder who he's talking about. Maybe like literally everybody in the Liberty Plus Intellectual Freedom Forum, like Telegram channel. It is such an asinine title to give a Nazi hangout space where I found literally ideological cohesion. And if you step out even slightly, you have to like spend an hour defending yourself. It is asinine.
Well, that's the again, and so I want to end on this because I do have to go.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I want to end on this because I some people in my audience, and again, it's like I don't want this to come off as like I'm punching at you guys, but I've noticed some of you have taken issue with me accepting. That's not the right word. Starting to use and kind of like co-opt the term woke right, and I want to be clear here. Because I kind of like said that in the intro that like I have to reluctantly admit James Lindsay is right, but not completely right. I think he's onto something that there is a woke right.
He's right in vibes and not in execution.
Well, right. Like he very falsely, because of his loyalty to Israel and to Zionism and his very faulty conception of the world. Like to him, it's not liberty versus tyranny. It's civilization versus barbarism, but he conflates civilization with a lot of things that are actually just tyranny. So he gets a lot of things wrong. But there are absolutely people on the right who are playing the same game that the woke left is playing. 100%. And they're not all one group, but some of them are Christian nationalists, and some of them are these people like N of One and the people who use the terms like libertarian nationalist and right-wing dissident, and I mean, people who, if I'm ever caught saying, well, the problem with Nazis, and I don't immediately follow that up with the problem with Nazis is they're genocidal and bigoted and anti-Semitic and authoritarian and basically socialistic and all that, I just say, like, the problem is really just the optics. Like, man, that is, I mean, that's messed up. That's just absolutely messed up. And there's unfortunately too many people who have given up on liberty and embraced this kind of thing, which is just absolutely nonsense. People were saying like, well, libertarianism isn't dealing with the real world because you don't understand politics. It's like, no. We understand politics better than anyone. Now, the problem is there's not enough of us and we're losing. But like, that's kind of like, like imagine being Frodo and Sam and you're like, halfway to Mount Doom. And then you're just like, well, man, we're a minority here trying to get this ring to the volcano. So we're just going to give up and use it. like that's what these people are doing unironically. And it's just horrendous. So no, I think what you just described there, like it is woke behavior. It is identitarian, it's cult-like, it's using shaming,
it's everything
tactics
they claim to oppose.
Yeah, 100%. It's just it's wokeness for white pride, and not even Christianity, but like this weird like Christian LARPing.
A lot of them even hate Christians because they say it's a Judeo, like it's like cucking to Jewry.
Well, you know what? Well, there's that. I've seen that, but I also, Jeremy Kaufman told me, like, well, I like the role Christianity played in shaping the West, but Christianity's belief that, all people are universally equally able to be saved is a real problem. I'm like, yeah, that's
the
not
problem for you, ain't it?
Yeah.
You want to act like God's keeping certain people away at the gates so that you can mirror that belief, so that you can keep certain people away at the border because you're a massive trying to avoid not cussing. You're a terrible person. You're a threat to liberty. You are a cancerous disease.
They're broods of vipers.
Yes.
They're basically Pharisees of the modern day. They're like
inches.
Like, I think what we've kind of like the central theme here has been that like it's basically that there's people on left and right, but we're talking about the right here right now, who essentially try to co-opt the language of liberty, but it's liberty for me and not for you, right? Which is exactly like that, and that's like what the Pharisees did. What Jesus called them out on is that like you want to hoard the blessings of God for you and not for everyone else. Right. That's why he called them, is that you don't go into the like the presence of God, but then you keep everyone else out as well. And everyone you proselytize, you make them just as much sons of hell as you. And you're like, whitewashed tombs that look pretty on the outside, but on the inside are just filled with bones and everything that's unclean and dead. And that's 100% what a lot of people on the, I think that what we're getting at is kind of like, this is more, dissident, like, kind of small game people in a sense, but they are representative of a kind of archetype that is infiltrating the right more now that Trump is in power.
Or just letting themselves be seen now that they don't have to hide.
Well, and I think to some extent, to connect this back to the whole, I think this connects more to what we've been talking about in the last several months about how I think there was a very pointed, and I don't want to get too tinfoil hat here to know how coordinated this was, but there was definitely a coordinated enough effort on the right to more than they ever have in my lifetime that I've been paying attention to politics to co-opt the liberty message and funnel that into Trump. And boy, that hasn't been the biggest bait. And I mean, Lucy saying to Charlie Brown, "I won't pull the football away this time." Yeah, a lot of us are on our backs right now, but it's time to get off our backs and get back into the fight. And that's what I'm trying to do. So I don't know. I guess I'll end by saying I'm not a leftist. I'm not an egalitarian, but I don't really care about playing your right-wing purity games.
Yeah.
I'm a Christian. I care about Christ. I care about my family. I care about liberty. I care about human flourishing. I care about, as I read in that passage, I care about the least of these. So,
and I'll keep my outro short because I have a tendency to go on for 800 years when we're supposed to be wrapping up. But I'll just keep it very short and say, take your alleged civilization, which is based on anything but reason, liberty, and justice, and shove it. In the words of Frank Murdoch, what is the point in having a civilization if we are no longer interested in being civilized?
100%. Couldn't say it any better. Thanks everybody for tuning in and watching this live show. We generally do these on Monday nights, but this was just too good of an opportunity to pass up to talk on something kind of that was kind of happening live. I think it was like Wednesday night when you messaged me this stuff. So yeah, make sure you're subscribed. That way you know when we do go off schedule and do something that's not on a Monday. I will be back again this Monday night. I can't remember right now who I'm talking to. I know I got a couple things in the works, though, especially for a couple weeks from now. So, yeah, make sure you're subscribed. Check out Libertarian Christian Institute. Check out Jeremiah. He's at Insanity is free on X if you want to follow him. I think he's definitely worth a follow. He's one of my favorite non-right-wing libertarians and just all around a good person. You just got to get past the, you're a little intense.
Yeah, mentally ill furry. It's fine.
All right. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in, and we will talk again soon. Take care.